that the largest issue going on right now is the War Powers Act. The President of the United States unilaterally has deployed a massive military force of the Caribbean, Air Force B-1, B-52 bombers, an attack submarine, a carrier battle group, a Marine amphib unit, a lot of U.S. Army special operations. And it appears we have the capability now in place to invade or take down the Venezuelan armed forces. Look at face value, it's nonsense that these two individuals who were killed deliberately by strike represented a continuing threat to the United States. It's utter nonsense. So the question is, again, practically speaking, what is going to happen about it going forward? Nothing. The inquiry's over. The admiral has spoken. He said they represented a continuing threat. They could have flipped the boat, which obviously is nonsense. So I think that inquiry is over. But again, when we train a U.S. intelligence officer, we tell them, tell me about an enemy force's capabilities, not their intentions. So as I look at what the U.S. naval power in the Caribbean is up to, it looks as if we have the capability to conduct active combat operations to bring down Maduro in Venezuela, probably to get access to Venezuelan oil. This has nothing to do with the drug trade. The drug production of cocaine is all in Colombia. It's tripled in the last 10 years with no aerial eradication. Venezuela is a transit company.
All right, folks, I need you to understand what retired Army General Barry McCaffrey is telling us here, because it cuts through all the propaganda and gets to the real truth about what's happening in the Caribbean right now. According to McCaffrey, the largest issue isn't the boat strikes themselves or even the potential war crimes. It's the War Powers Act. The President of the United States has unilaterally deployed a massive military force to the Caribbean. Air Force B-1 and B-52 bombers, an attack submarine, a carrier battle group, a Marine amphibious unit, and significant U.S. Army Special Operations Forces. McCaffrey looks at this force composition with his trained military eye and says it appears we now have the capability in place to invade or take down the Venezuelan armed forces. Let me repeat that. This isn't about drug interdiction. This is an invasion force. And McCaffrey, who knows how to assess military capabilities, states plainly, look at face value. It's nonsense that these two individuals who were killed deliberately by strike represented a continuing threat to the United States. It's utter nonsense. By the way, I am trying to do my best to gather all the information I can for you and share it with you. Please leave your likes and comments, and I would be grateful if you subscribed. Let's continue. So, what's going to happen about it going forward? McCaffrey's answer is devastating. Nothing. The inquiry is over. The admiral has spoken. He said they represented a continuing threat, that they could have flipped the boat, which is obviously nonsense. The inquiry is done. But here's what McCaffrey wants us to focus on. When we train a U.S. intelligence officer, we tell them, tell me about an enemy force's capabilities, not their intentions. So as I look at what U.S. naval power in the Caribbean is up to, it looks as if we have the capability to conduct active combat operations to bring down Maduro in Venezuela, probably to get access to Venezuelan oil. This has nothing to do with the drug trade. Nothing. The drug production of cocaine is all in Colombia. It's tripled in the last 10 years with no aerial eradication. Venezuela is a transit country, not a production center. So there you have it from a retired Army general who knows exactly what he's looking at. Trump and Pete Hegseth's illegal war in the Caribbean has nothing to do with what Hegseth calls narco-terrorists at all. It has everything to do with regime change and giving Trump's billionaire oil buddies access to Venezuela's rich oil reserves. Companies like Shell, ExxonMobil, BP, British Petroleum, these are the real beneficiaries of this operation. This is about the bloodlust of an out-of-control, sloppy, and totally unqualified Secretary of Defense who posts psychotic content like Franklin the Turtle killing a bunch of other turtles in boats. He reposts psychopathic messages from some MAGA podcaster named Andrew Colvett who writes, "Every new attack aimed at Pete Hegseth makes me want another drug boat blown up and sent to the bottom of the ocean." And our esteemed class act of a Secretary of Defense responds, "Your wish is our command. Just sunk another narco boat." I don't even know what to say. This is after Hegseth ordered yet another deadly boat strike on the same day that Congress was meeting with the commander who directed that first lethal September boat strike that left 2 survivors. New reporting from the New York Times claims those 2 survivors were waving, like hello, maybe for help. I imagine in the video shown to Congress members behind closed doors before Admiral Bradley ordered the follow-up strike that killed them, they were on this blown-up piece of boat waving for help. It's horrifying to think about. Our country blows them to smithereens in the middle of the ocean. As General McCaffrey mentioned, if Trump was really concerned about the war on drugs, he certainly wouldn't have pardoned a convicted drug lord earlier this week. The former right-wing president of Honduras, Juan Orlando Hernandez, who Trump's own DOJ stated in court documents helped turn Honduras into one of the most dangerous countries in the world, Trump has now pardoned him from a 45-year sentence that he didn't even serve 1 year of. So spare me this nonsense about fighting drugs. What a transparent lie. Meanwhile, our taxpayer-funded military appears to be committing extrajudicial murders on lowly drug runners in the Caribbean. The commander in charge of many of these operations, Navy Admiral Frank M. Bradley, met behind closed doors with House and Senate members on Thursday and allegedly told them he indeed called the shots for that September 2nd mission and stood by the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th strikes on that Venezuelan boat. Admiral Bradley's justification to lawmakers was that those 2 remaining survivors presented some type of threat to the United States and appeared to be getting back into the fight. With what? A decimated, on-fire boat? We now know the video they released on social media was not the full video because it turns out 2 men survived that first attack. So in what seems to be a blatant violation of the laws of war, they were struck again, the shipwrecked men, 3 more times. They ended up dying. Democratic Congressman Adam Smith, ranking member of the Armed Services Committee, spoke to the New Republic about what he saw in the full video. Smith said it shows 2 men sitting shirtless atop a portion of a capsized boat that was still above water. That portion could barely have fit 4 people. It looks like 2 classically shipwrecked people, Smith said. But in the briefing, lawmakers were told it was judged these 2 people were capable of returning to the fight. Smith called it a highly questionable decision that these 2 people on that obviously incapacitated vessel were still in any kind of fight. Democratic Congressman Jim Himes of Connecticut also met with Admiral Bradley in those closed-door meetings and saw the entire video. He said, "These sorts of videos in other contexts are not foreign to me, so I'm not pearl-clutching over something I haven't seen before. But what I saw in that video, and I'm hoping the American people will have an opportunity to see it and judge for themselves, were 2 individuals whose boat had been incinerated and capsized, clinging for life without any visible means of survival or support, and then they were killed." Himes continued, "It raises profound moral and ethical issues that anybody who watches this video should have. But it also points to something that is super clear in the laws of armed conflict and in the Pentagon's regulations around that, which is that once an individual has been placed out of any ability to conduct hostilities, to attack you, the technical phrase is hors de combat. Once an individual can't attack you, you can't kill that individual. When asked if there was evidence they were radioing or trying to communicate with other boats, Himes was clear. There was no radio. There were 2 individuals clinging to flotsam. That's what there was. There wasn't weaponry of any kind. There wasn't a radio. There was no means for them to communicate. Let me remind you all that Trump never came to Congress to get authorization or approval for wartime acts against Venezuela, which by law he is required to do. Not that Congress would provide any oversight anyway. They've completely abdicated all responsibility for anything. They just bow down and let him run all over them. Bootlicking MAGA Senator Tom Cotton, who is the chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, is staunchly defending dear leader. Watch John Berman of CNN absolutely destroy his argument. Berman asks when Congress passed the authorization for use of force to attack suspected drug dealers. Cotton tries to dodge by comparing it to Obama's drone strikes, but Berman shuts that down immediately. There was an authorization for use of military force against terrorists. In this case, when was the authorized use of military force to attack suspected drug dealers off the coast of Venezuela? Cotton claims the president has inherent authority as commander-in-chief under the Constitution to protect America against foreign terrorist organizations, and that Congress has passed laws allowing the president to designate such organizations. But here's the problem. The latest explanation from the administration is that these are non-state actors, which completely undermines Cotton's argument. Senator Cotton doesn't have the law on his side, and that's exactly why JAGs, Judge Advocate Generals, are ringing alarm bells. What Trump is doing with Psycho Pete at his side is fully dictatorial and lawless. A JAG officer explained, "How could you justify that knowing that once an individual is shipwrecked, they are essentially out of combat?" But again, this all goes back to the most troubling aspect of that statement by the White House press secretary, which is this idea that President Trump can merely designate a narco group as a foreign terrorist organization, and somehow that authorizes the use of deadly combat power as a measure of first resort, shifting from a law enforcement to a wartime paradigm. That's a chilling assertion of authority. Why are we even treating this as a war? That should be the first question the committee should be asking, not just of the admiral, but of the administration. Here's former President Obama's national security advisor, Ben Rhodes. They can spin whatever they want. There's a very established fact of a video that shows what happened, and you can't spin the existence of a video. And by the way, these types of strikes are very well documented. I'm sure there's a paper trail. I'm sure there's communications. I'm sure there's perhaps even multiple videos. The reality is, this is the definition of why we have laws of war, so that people who are in duress, people who are wounded, people who can pose literally no threat whatsoever. There's no spin that can describe how people hanging onto a burning boat posed a threat to U.S. military forces whatsoever. That's physically impossible. Rhodes continues, "They can talk all they want about drugs on the boat if that's the case, but that doesn't justify taking this strike against people that were clearly in duress. This is why we have those laws. Frankly, we have them in part because of humanitarian purposes, in part because we want our own troops when they're in harm's way to have the capacity to surrender without being killed while they're trying to do so, and they've yet to describe a legal basis for the entire operation." Rhodes makes a crucial point. If we accept the premise that Donald Trump can decide to kill people hundreds of miles away from the United States, even if there are drugs on those boats, and they're not providing a lot of evidence to back that up, even if there are, because somehow those drugs might reach the United States and might pose a threat to us, imagine how much that opens up the aperture for who he could kill and take military force against, based on the presumption that somehow they might someday pose a threat because the drugs might sometime get here. We're in very dangerous territory, and this is a time where Congress needs to reassert itself on war powers, because right now, Donald Trump is doing something I can't think of any precedent for. He's exactly right. We have rules of war and engagement because we're supposed to be an honorable nation. But Trump and Hegseth don't give a damn about the people serving our nation. That's obvious as Trump uses National Guard members as pawns. He's never served a day in his life. He's putting service members' lives on the line without caring about them. He's a 5-time draft dodger. And pardon me for getting salty, but it infuriates me. I come from a military family. My father was a Navy flight surgeon. I live in Military Service Central. I know more dead SEALs than live ones at this point. The way Trump pisses all over our service members infuriates me personally. I'll wrap up with this. A newly promoted 4-star admiral named Alvin Halsey, who has command of the Central American Corridor, is reportedly being forced out by Pete Hegseth. According to the Wall Street Journal, a Rupert Murdoch publication, not some liberal outlet, after only 1 year into his tenure, Halsey is being forced out by Crazy Pete. Halsey, who has expertise in drug trafficking in that corridor, had allegedly brought up concerns to Hegseth about the legality of these boat strikes. Hegseth also believed Admiral Halsey was the source of leaks from the DoD. So Halsey is stepping down on December 12th, taking early retirement barely a year into his new command post as a 4-star admiral. That's insane. There's been quite a bit of reporting that Sneaky Pete is obsessed with leaks, which is ironic given the Inspector General's report just released showing he leaked the most classified plans ever. He put on blast when our pilots were going out on strikes, and he's worried about leaks. This man is so unqualified. He's a clown show, and it infuriates me. Here's another quote from that Wall Street Journal article. Hegseth reportedly told Halsey, "You're either on the team or you're not. When you get an order, you move out fast and don't ask questions." If that's the attitude the current Secretary of Defense has at the Pentagon, imagine how other admirals are going to feel. You think Admiral Bradley, who was just recently promoted to Southern Command SOCOM, is going to tell lawmakers how it really is? I don't think so. He's probably concerned for his new job. He's seeing Admiral Halsey get pushed out and thinking he better keep his mouth shut if he wants to hold on to his position. When you've put that many years into military service, you're probably not going to risk your career by telling the truth. That's my opinion based on human nature and what we're seeing. Lastly, those drug boats in the Caribbean are trafficking cocaine, not fentanyl. And fentanyl doesn't come from Venezuela. It comes from China and is trafficked through Mexico. If Trump and Hegseth were really worried about narco-terrorists, they'd be going after that pattern of drugs, which primarily impacts red states, West Virginia, Kentucky, Ohio. It's the fentanyl crisis that's killing people by the thousands. Yeah, cocaine is bad. Just ask Don Jr. But that's not the drug crisis killing Americans. It's fentanyl, and it's not coming from Venezuela. This is just a ruse for Trump's billionaire oil buddies to break into Venezuela's rich oil supplies. That's what this is really about. Those are my thoughts. I know it's a lot, but we must remain informed even when it's overwhelming. We must continue calling out the lawlessness of this administration. They are absolutely lawless. They are criminals. Every single one enabling this, from Trump to Stephen Miller to Russell Vought to Kristi Noem to Pete Hegseth. They're one big, massive crime syndicate lining their pockets, and we're going to take them down. Stay strong, keep fighting, and I'll see you back here soon.